everyone, and thank you for joining us. Spending time out of your Monday afternoon, early evening for this critical community briefing on our air quality. So for as many of you may know, that the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has been conducting community air quality monitoring, targeting cities of New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and Yonkers to identify what will be a forward-thinking strategy on how to really address the protection of our equitable access to clean air. We can all agree that us as Homo sapiens, for as long as we've been on this planet, we have always been given access to clean air. It's clean air, clean water through rain, and then it was up to us to really be innovative with our sapiens as Homo sapiens to be able to access food and shelter. But this initiative by the DEC is really critical because it's allowing us to be able to pioneer what are the partnerships that our communities need to be able to receive this information and get it out to our stakeholders. Cities in New Rochelle, Yonkers, and Mount Vernon, we know that these are critical cities, and I do want to make a moment to acknowledge some of the other cities and communities in Westchester that are in critical need of air quality monitoring, such as the big city of Peekskill, Village of Portchester as well. And also we do know that there are some issues in White Plains and Sleepy Hollow. But just to make sure that we set now on the city of Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle, which are cities that are very critically identifying a lot of issues that we need to make sure they're addressing. I was able to identify statistics that I do want to share with you based upon the federal census tracts that all of you can access through the EPA's climate and economic justice screening tool that shows that out of the census tracts in the cities of Yonkers, 23.9% of the residents have asthma. In the city of Mount Vernon, 43.6% of the residents in the census tracts of disadvantaged communities have asthma. And in the city of New Rochelle, 19.8% of the residents in the census tracts have asthma. Unless we're unable to really address these issues, we're gonna be seeing us continue to go on this trend of asthma rising amongst our youth and amongst our general population, which will have a devastating impact in our overall quality of health. And also making sure that when we have these conversations, we do it through the lens of a rainbow coalition of the diversity of our communities. Our communities of Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and Yonkers are known for our diversity, for our large Black populations, our large Hispanic populations, and also making sure that we don't overlook our Asian populations, and also making sure that we do strongly walk shoulder and shoulder with our members of the white community as well too. City of Mount Vernon actually leads the state of New York as for our Black population as a city government with the largest Black population percentage in the entire state of New York, which is something that really is important in terms of really being able to support Black leadership in this space. But regardless, we are here to make sure that we have this conversation on the importance of air quality monitoring and the importance of all of us coming together to have a forward-thinking dialogue. I spoke with Raya about the importance of this conversation, and I honestly told her I feel like you're going to leave us for the DEC in the future because this is such a forward-thinking, far-sighted initiative that's needed of being able to prepare residents for an event that the DEC is hosting and making sure that when we're receiving this information from our state officials, it's something that we are already exposed to, and we're able to be better positioned to co-facilitate the dialogue and best represent our neighbors in this conversation. And I do want to take a moment to really recognize the dynamic panelists that we have. I call these people literally the top tier environmental justice leaders that we have here in Westchester County, starting with Shane Brooks of the city of Mount Vernon, who is the director of sustainability for the city of Mount Vernon. I call him George Washington for environmental justice and sustainability in Mount Vernon, because not only is he leading the position of director of sustainability, but he actually created this position in the city of Mount Vernon because he knew how important it is to have sustainability in the core nucleus of city operations and to be able to make sure that residents know that this is something that's being taken seriously at the highest level in City Hall. Also, Dr. Bob Morrow really provides invaluable insight through his medical background as a medical doctor, someone that is able to interpret data and know the physiological impact it can have on human bodies, and also his strong environmental background as well as one of the founding members of the BZAC Environmental Education Center in the city of Yonkers. And last but not least, Raya Salter Esquire. who is the founder and executive director of the Energy Justice Law Policy Center, the organization that's convening the Energy Justice Alliance, and able for us to have this conversation, and also a founding member of the New York State Climate Action Council, where Raya has been an invaluable voice for us in meetings with State Department heads and government bureaucrats, if I'm able to call them that, to make sure that we're not overlooking some of the people that really are living in compromised positions or losing hope in real time in the midst of our climate emergency. A lot of eyes are on the state of New York, both nationally and also internationally. Tomorrow is actually the start of the UN General Assembly, which will be starting here in New York. So a lot of people are looking at the state of New York to really be that compass north about us having a fair and equitable, just transition, addressing our climate emergency, and making sure we're able to preserve our natural resources for future generations to come. So with that being said, I would like to make sure that I give the floor to our first speaker, Raya Salter. Before I give the floor to Raya Salter, I would like to make sure I really emphasize the importance of this initiative. This community air quality is allowing us to have public oversight over the air quality of our communities on a block by block basis. And this isn't something we're just going to be monitoring like some sort of Tuskegee experiment in Westchester County. We want to make sure we are taking this data, we're analyzing it, we're looking at the point source and non-point source points of pollution, and we're able to come together and really build a strong coalition so that we could be able to lead the needed advocacy on all levels of government to mitigate these issues and make sure that we're preserving our access to clean air for generations to come. So with that being said, I'm gonna give the floor to Raya Salter. Thank you so much, Raya, for convening this event and allowing us to meet with one another to talk about air quality as neighbors in Westchester County.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks everyone for joining today. Really, and I'm going to be brief and there's a lot of information. And we could talk for a long time about this. I truly believe we're in a really a once in a generation opportunity to have actual input to see the pollution control measures actually implemented and be funded. We're in a position where because of our EJ requirements in our state law, and that's the only reason the state is doing this local air monitoring. What a little bit about the process. The state was required by law to monitor in several areas, piloting air monitoring, including New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and Yonkers. You may know that they only included New Rochelle after an outcry, and we managed to convince them. Importantly, this process is moving forward as the law requires. This year, the state is required to create a plan, an action plan for now how to put pollution mitigation measures in place now that they've worked to identify some of these areas. That's why, and they're also required to do this engagement process. That's why this is so important that we step up, because unless we come together and tell them what we want, this plan is going to march forward without us. Importantly, we must stand in solidarity with our areas in our region that were not part of the pilot for a lot of reasons, right? Because these are our peoples. In White Plains, in Peekskill, we got a trash incinerator to shut down. But we can't do this. We can't actually have an impact on our air quality unless we work together. We need regional approaches. And I'm going to ask everyone here to be leaderful. Um, Leaderful, meaning we engage on this, look at this data, step up, don't apologize, don't ask for permission. We need to do this together. What is my org doing about this? Yes, we convene the Energy Justice Alliance and we organize and we do our thing. We know about that. Also, we have a campaign called the Air of Truth campaign. It's focused on New Rochelle, where we have young people in our schools studying this data. But the point of it is to be an awareness raising campaign, not to be the leaders of things. So we got air monitoring being led in our county by people who have been doing this for a minute. The state's data is not the be all end all, and we're going to hear about that. And there are criticisms, and it's important that we know that. We have Dr. Bob, we have Groundwork, we have WAS, we have all of our folks doing this work. And so basically, it's about lifting up what you are doing so we can all get in this together. Importantly, I'm going to actually take a bit of time to show you what it is exactly that we are talking about. And in the chat, you'll see I put several links. One of them, I think, is to this page, the story maps. This is what the state has put together, what you need to look at to be prepared for this meeting on the 25th that I hope everybody comes through to. And I'm going to scroll down. You see, it's actually, again, this is our activism in action. This is the state having done a whole section on our area on historical redlining. Is it right? We need you to help to look at it. And if it's not, this is our time to say it. Do you see what I'm saying? Here we go to the air pollution sources. Now, this is where everybody, if you knew Rochelle, rep New Rochelle. Ow, New Rochelle in the house, New Rochelle in the house. Okay. So here we are. What you see, it's important to understand in Westchester, we have poor air quality, period. The American Lung Association has given us low grades, but what we're talking about is disparities in our communities. That's what we're talking about here. So this is the state data. And what they're saying is that there are higher levels of pollution, primarily along I-95, but not only. And if you live in the Lincoln area, the West End, Rochelle Heights, French Ridge, we mean you. Multiple pollutant focus spots of black carbon, PM 2.5, and nitrous oxide. And a lot of these areas are next to our schools, our housing, our public housing. So let's go ahead and take a look, shall we? Now, look. Hey, New Rochellians, you know this map that I'm looking at. I don't have to tell you. Paul Presendu, you know this, right?
Yeah, well, I know exactly what region that is.
Right? So look at this. Okay. I'm just using for one, black carbon. 129% elevation above typical black carbon in this box that I clicked here. Now, when we go into another view, what it'll show you, sorry, what it'll show you, show sources and receptors. Here is where they show you, right? If I click on that same spot, what we got? Fabricated metal products, right? So there's a source, some of it, and we drive by these places, right? But as you can see, they've showed us where the hospital, the school, the childcare centers are in proximity to these focus spots. Okay, so this is, okay, we're going to move on because I'm going to need you to look at this map, New Rochelle. I'm going to need you to look at this map, look at your house, look at your friend's house, look at your school, and see things like 120 elevated black carbon. Here, 75% elevation black carbon, right over here in the West End. This is what we're talking about here, okay? Let's go ahead. All my people in Mount Vernon, I hope you rep yourself, please. Rep yourself. Here we go. Look at this. Okay, well, we got 58% elevation above nitrous oxide. Okay, let's show the receptors. Okay. If you go to Rebecca Turner Academy, I think you have something to say here or you have a concern, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Let's move on. Yonkers, my friends in Yonkers, you see what we got here? Let's show our focus spots. We know this story, right? We know this story. We know this story. I'm just going to pick one. This link to this is in the chat, and I really encourage, for some reason, I'm picking on black carbon. 83% elevation above other areas in the study area. Now, understand the air quality in Westchester is bad. We are talking about disparities here. Okay, so this is because of our climate law. This isn't because they darn near felt like it. Now, here I want folks to look at this because there's a community survey and other information. And also, you may think that some of this information isn't even right. Point being, I also in the chat, we have some sample background fact sheets and testimony for this meeting. I want you to take a look at that. You tell me what's wrong with it. You tell me something that is a particular concern to you that you don't think has been represented. And the reason this is so important is because the state is mandated to do pollution control measures. This could include clean zero emission buses. This could include green infrastructure to mitigate pollution source, the pollution. This could be enforcement of idling, enforcement of permits that aren't being taken care of. And so I really need folks to jump in and be leaderful. We're going to remember our solidarity with our region, and we need to bring that message on the 25th. And so this is just and there are funds that are available to do this. So it's an opportunity to work with the state in criticism of the state. Come on full blast to the state on this meeting on the 25th. Don't come shy. And our local leaders to work together towards solutions. And I probably took just a little more time than I meant. So I'm going to hand it back to our MC, Paul.
You did great, Raya. Thank you so much. And speaking about the event on the 25th, I'm happy that we are joined by Mount Vernon's Sustainability Director, Mr. Shane Brooks, who could share a little bit about what the meeting on the 25th will look like and the position of leadership Mount Vernon has been taking in making sure that we are leading on this effort on behalf of the cities of New Rochelle and also the city of Yonkers. Sustainability Director Brooks, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this important community air quality monitoring update.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raya. Thank you, Dr. Bob, for allowing me to be on this panel. Um, just to speak briefly about the meeting on September 25th during Climate Week. The meeting, well, one of the first meetings will be in Mount Vernon at the Doles Community Center, which is 250 South 6th Avenue. It will be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And the format of the meeting is going to be the first hour being more of an open talk. They'll have tables with different graphs, different charts, and things like that. And hour two would be more of a presentation platform. Well, they'll be talking about the rollout of the data. I'm sure they'll have the information that Raya put up on the screen previously. So Mount Vernon will be hosting that meeting. It's all the logistics is all set up, just a few minor things to work out. And yeah, so as Paul said, I'm the Director of Sustainability for the city of Mount Vernon. I've always had a knack for the environment, always had a green thumb, and figured out that the city of Mount Vernon needs someone to really focus on this environment stuff, all the money that's being available, and all the catching up that we have to do. You know, Mount Vernon is considered one of the last undeveloped cities in the lower Hudson Valley. So we got a lot of catching up to do. But we are on the way. We're on the way. Our mayor, Sean Patterson Howard, is one of the only climate mayors in this area. She also sits on the EPA Regional Advisory Board. She recently went to COP28 with Bloomberg to see what the rest of the world is doing and to see if she can extract some solutions and ideas to bring back to Mount Vernon. That was a great trip. We all learned a lot from that trip. But Mount Vernon is very unique. Mount Vernon is probably the best positioned city in Westchester County, given the geography, given the layout. We have 3 Metro North stations, walking distance of 2 subways, 15 minutes from White Plains, 20 minutes from New York City. So some stats about Mount Vernon. If you look us up, Mount Vernon the census would say 78,000. We're more like 110,000 people. Mount Vernon has some of the highest asthma, cardiovascular, and respiratory illness rates in New York State. We also have the 4th largest senior population in New York State. And not proud to say, but we also have the highest homeless student population in Westchester County. We are a city of homes. We lack tree canopies. We experience urban heat island effects. We have crumbling sewer infrastructure that we are steadily and daily trying to correct. Just so you know, it's public. Mount Vernon is under a federal consent decree for our sewer infrastructure by the EPA and DEC. Governor Hochul gave us $160 million to start the remediation of our sewer infrastructure. Some of the areas that were just talked about, Lincoln Avenue runs through New Rochelle and it crosses over through Pelham and crosses over through Mount Vernon. And we've realized or already had some very surface conversations regarding how do we set policy for trucks whose business is not in Mount Vernon, but they come into Mount Vernon to do business. And that's an ongoing conversation. Mount Vernon has a solid waste transfer station in Mount Vernon that's operated by the county. You know, we have a lot of diesel trucks coming down. We have solid waste trucks hauling waste, which is what you call, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the word. That also has pollution in it, air pollution just coming through our cities. We are one of the blackest cities north of the Mason-Dixon line. We have 96 different ethnicities, and we have many different cultures. So some of the pollutants that were identified in this study, the particulate matter, the nitrogen oxide, the black carbon, as Ryan was talking about. There's technology for local municipalities to detect this stuff, but the technology is expensive, and most often some governments, they have a great initiative, but they don't have the infrastructure to sustain it. And that's something that the city of Mount Vernon is working on. Also, a few other things that we are working on is that we got a $1 million urban forestry grant that will help us increase our annual tree plantings that will reduce the urban heat island effect. We're also looking into coolcrete. We're looking into a whole lot of other, I guess, solutions to combat climate change. We know that infrastructure cannot keep up with climate change. It's just happening too fast. So those are some of the things that we're trying to implement. Some of the things that I'm trying to do as a director of sustainability is I've already started the transition of our gas-powered landscaping equipment to fully electric. I would say we're about 50% good with that transition. We're also thinking about creating green zones. Green zones are certain areas of the city, particularly downtown areas where there's no idling. There's no idling whatsoever. So implementing an idling law. But what Raya showed through the data, which this is my first time seeing regarding Rebecca Turner, that's alarming. That's alarming. And I'm almost concerned that the school district doesn't know anything about it. Given the fact that Rebecca Turner is in an industrial zone, you would hope that they would have included some sort of sensors on their building to detect high levels of pollution. We're not like Yonkers. Our government, city government and school district is two separate entities. We have two separate budgets. We do our best to work together, but it's not like the mayor can say, hey, you must do this. So that's an ongoing partnership that we're strengthening daily. Is there any other things, Raya and Paul, you wanted me to touch on? Because I'm just.
No, I think it's great. And it'd be great too if you can share the flyer. You know,
Yes.
we'll follow up with everybody.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think you touched upon it. You touched upon the health impacts. You touched upon the pollutants that are recorded, and it's a powerful narrative. You tying it into Rebecca Turner because this is a whole academic institution that's in a compromised census tract. So
Right.
that's powerful to talk about. Yeah, and then we have the event coming up on the 25th. We hope that everyone
Yes.
here will be in attendance for that event. And please make sure you're able to share it with your friends and neighbors. Some of you are members of organizations. I know whether if you're like Talbert Thomas, who leads a neighborhood association, or or Eileen, Natty Topo there. Some of you have pretty dynamic networks. So definitely it's important that we really get as many people out to the 25th, the event on the 25th. So I guess I'll keep going just in the interest of time, and perfect timing too, Shade, with our program on the show, because our next speaker is Dr. Bob Morrow of the BSAC Environmental Education Center, retired physician who has done a lot of dynamic work with BSAC, already taking a leadership on air quality monitoring, and also through his professional background as a medical doctor, is someone that is keenly aware of some of the physiological impacts of compromised air with our cardiovascular and also respiratory system. So, Dr. Morrow, thank you for taking time to join us for this important dialogue. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Excuse me, delighted to hear everybody. This is a good volume. The
I can hear you.
Great. There are many ways of looking at it, and the people of New York decided to vote in a referendum to have an evaluation of the environment done, and it was led by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And we learned a lot. In my census tract, I live in Southwest Yonkers, about 300 yards from the place where they take the sewage from half of Westchester. We get about 105 million gallons of sewage come down, and clearly it's problematic, but now we have numbers so people can't wag their fingers at us and say, stop complaining because of the odors. The odors tell you that something else is being released at the same time. For example, methane doesn't have much of an odor, yet we're flaring methane at our plant. And those are the eternal flames that go. There are several of them that burn methane in an inefficient way. Methane is one of the strongest climate warming gases there is, and we're pumping ours from our toilets into the atmosphere, which requires a particularly short mental evaluation of the situation. The plant was designed in the mid 70s and earlier. But then we came out with some numbers. So what did we find out about our census tract where I live? We found that in terms of adults over 65, we are 20%, 22%. So a great deal of New York State has older people than us, which then makes the next issue somewhat weird. Heart attacks, we are worse than 94% of New York State. I'll let that sink in. We're young and we have a huge number more heart attacks than 93% of the state. Asthma, we are at 84%, which I guess could be worse, but it's hard to see why. And low birth weight, we're at 69%, meaning that we're worse than 69% of the population. But the one that really reaches out and smacks us is the premature deaths. We are 97th percentile in the state of New York, even though we are a fairly young census tract. And that goes for those census tracts around us, which have surprised large preponderance of non-white people. A lot of this has to do with what's coming off of the plant, the sewage plant, what's coming off of the sugar plant, which pumps the heating elements that they use to drive the water out of the sugar that we could have in whatever you like your sugar in. And they are producing a huge amount of pollutants that are not being measured. Neither the sewage treatment plant nor the sugar plant have had a measurement of those substances in the air since 2018. Yes, that's what you heard. They don't keep measuring it. They had been very bad in the past. They said they're going to fix it. And so the county has been kind enough to say is when you get it fixed, we'll measure it again, and haven't. So we're pumping all sorts of poisons into the air. So at the BZAC Center, we've been doing a few things to try to evaluate all of this. One of them is if you drive around town with a car during the day and measure the level of pollutants, you're going to get a very different number than if you take your sensors and put them near the sources of pollution, like the sewage treatment plant, like the sugar plant, a few other spots. You're going to get totally different numbers. And sure enough, that's what we have started to find. What we've done is we've started with a few sensors that we bought and hung up. And one of our teachers, Harry Hall, has gotten his students to create another 10 of those sensors, quite good looking. We're going to start hanging them around the city. We immediately discovered that next to the sewage treatment plant where I live, that the numbers are really pretty good in the morning. Unfortunately, once you get to 8 p.m., they start going up from what had somewhere between 4 and a 20, doesn't matter what those are. And by midnight, it's up to 170. So they're pumping their bad stuff out at night. And if you drive a car around in the daytime on the ground and don't stay put in one place, instead of having sensors, you don't find this out. So we're going to be putting up another 10 sensors that the students have built for us. And we're going to buy another 8 sensors and put them around. Groundwork is doing something similar in a 3-year project, and they're using much more sensitive sensors than we are, and we'll see what the results are in 2 or 3 years. Our results should be available in a month or 2. That's the situation. There's no reason for that to be. We don't need 100 sugar trucks, giant 2-block long, it looks, sugar trucks, driving into the plant, loading up and driving out. There's 100 of them that do that in and out, 200 trips daily, and they're all diesel. Now, is this necessary? Well, we could probably find a better way to do it. The diesel trains, we could do better. We were also asking the city of New York and Yonkers to create a pathway along the railroad track on the river so that people can bike or walk and go to work, save a lot of money and a lot of time breathing the fresh river air. So we're going to try to do that. The railroads have notoriously blocked this over the last 30 years, but I think we're starting to make some headway in that area. So that's a fairly quick thing to know. Just want to mention that we look at particulates. You'll hear PM 2.5s. Those are the nasty ones that cause inflammation. When you breathe them in, they get into your bloodstream because they're so small. They can go through your lung into your bloodstream. Where they land, they can create inflammation. And we have blocks for 4 or 5 people who have had pancreatic cancer in a very unexpected way, as well as these other problems. The PM 2.5s need to be measured, need to be published. We'll be trying to do that at the BZAC Center. And then there are the volatiles, particularly the methane and other products of combustion that create similar problems. And then, of course, we're now finding out that over the years, it's been the thing to do to take the retained sludge from dewatering the poop and putting it on fields as a fertilizer, as manure. And what we're now finding is we're loading up many, many fields, like 70% in the country, with the plastic particles that cause another range of diseases. If the public doesn't sound off on the data, doesn't understand it, we're not going to get anywhere. So I'll leave it at that. Happy to take lots of questions, but if we don't do something about it, take this data and go to our elected officials and demand a change, it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morrow. And we do have a couple of questions if we want to transition immediately to our Q&A while you're here.
Sure.
One person by the name of Bonnie Weinbach asks, what kind of sensors are you using and what pollutants are you monitoring? I know that you touched upon it if you want to revisit that information.
Yeah, we started with a company called Purple Air because they do mass-produced citizen science monitors for a little less than $200 each, and they are then connected to the cellular system. So it immediately downloads all of the monitors that are out there, so you can see what's going on in different places over time. They also do measurements that are then graphed out. So that's Purple Air. We're the folks at I'm sorry, the other folks doing this are using far more expensive devices and far more expensive interpreters. And we are also using the guts of a purple air in structures that have been built by the students, and we'll compare those side by side with the commercial ones we get. And we now have just one of each of those, and shortly we will have 10, shortly meaning the next week or two, and we'll start hanging them around the city, and those will give us recordings over a 24-hour period, and they just keep going. And they're very low energy, so they can need recharging every month or two, and work 24/7.
All right. Um, I see another here another comment from Stephen Levy of the Federated Conservation Westchester County, who said while we await truck and school bus electrification to reduce diesel emissions, maybe it's time to seek immediate cleaner options such as non-fossil renewable fuel options such as renewable fuel and renewable natural gas. Um, and
I'm
yes,
happy to, well,
yes.
I will say, and there may be some others. Raise your hand actually if you raise your hand if you're on this call and you want to weigh in here, because I know we have other folks here. Um, it is the position of myself and many others that some of these technologies we put in the false solutions category. We've got Courtney weighing into saying natural gas is not renewable. um, and can be harmful, and also some renewable fuels are also not the answers that we're seeking. They can do more harm than good. But that's, I'm not coming for you. Um, but that certainly is my thoughts on it. Dr. Bob may have others. I don't know, actually, maybe Courtney would, I know Courtney, I saw you put something in the chat. You may. Are you in?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I'm mid making dinner for my family, but I live in Peekskill, 400 feet from the Algonquin gas pipeline that carries a large fraction of gas from the shale fields of Pennsylvania up to New England. This was a pipeline that's been expanded multiple times at the cost of billions of dollars under the false solutions, bridge to nowhere, bridge fuel lie. And we, Dr. Bob mentioned methane and how much worse that is in terms of climate warming. Some estimates have it 86 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than carbon, than CO2 in the short term. So really the fracking boom and quote unquote natural gas is really what we have to thank for this big acceleration in warming over recent months. So I think we'd be in a great shape if what we were trying to solve was how to move trucks around without gas. But for right now, we've got a whole bunch of other issues that we're facing. But yeah, I think we don't want to get caught up in the false solutions discussion. And I think we know like electric vehicles and public transportation and things like that are the way to go.
All right. Thank you so much, Courtney. Shane, I know I saw you had your hand raised. Mr. Shane Brooks. I think you'll need to unmute.
Mike, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, I have a question for Dr. Bob, even though like I'm on the panel. I've always wondered, are children born with asthma or is it developed?
Yes. Some kids like myself are hypersensitive from birth and have much more reaction to like mowed grass or what have you. And other people develop an inflammatory response to irritants, meaning if there's a lot of dust, the PM 2.5s in the air, you're going to end up having a lot of mucus and a lot of wheezing, and we call that asthma.
So
Some more than others.
So does it play, so the role scenario, mother is living low income family, mother is living in public housing, air quality is not good. She conceives. Can it be passed down through the womb, or like, is there any effect of the mom having asthma before the birth of the baby?
And I think that's an area of dispute, whether it's genetic, environmental, both, but I don't think it's related to pregnancy. And of course, when women are pregnant, they have some pressure on their lungs. They might have more trouble with their breathing, and or they might have asthma come out worse because of that situation. But what it has to do with most likely is a combination of being very sensitive to irritants and other things as a genetic basis, as well as having those things around for everybody, which makes for a lot more wheezing.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions, or this is our Q&A period. If you want to raise your hand or place it into the chat, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Oh, I see. All right, I see a question here from Lisa Burton of New Rochelle. What about changing the local law regarding environmental impact so that only data collected locally can be included in the analysis? Would anyone like to provide feedback on that?
I'll speak to that. I think that's exactly the type of idea that we should be proposing to the state and our local officials. If we've got better data, and we do, and it's the state's data and it's in their possession, why can't we figure out how to use local data to address local problems in our code? I think that's a good idea.
Amazing.
Need to be talked about, vetted, thought about, but yes, absolutely something to present, I would say.
I also have another question. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking, Dr. Bob, again, let's say, so is it a policy, a federal policy or a state policy where, let's say, a cluster in a city goes to their community health center, their patients of the community health center, and a cluster in a city has all of a sudden developed asthma, some respiratory illnesses? Is it the physician or the institution that's caring for them, is it their responsibility to report that to a higher health institution?
Having worked for the last 50 years in East Harlem, Bronx, and Yonkers, no, they
Wow.
like to ignore it. And in fact, what we're seeing now is a real drop off in the availability of primary care for people. It's a bit shocking what's going on in healthcare at the moment. You're not all here today to hear that lecture, but it is shocking how hard it is to get care outside of an emergency room where you're immediately ping-ponged into some specialist visit and given lots of tests, rather than having a lifelong relationship with healthcare providers who you trust. Leaving that aside, no, epidemiologists, people who are interested in the topic, might pick up on it and might try to get it out to the public. We've tried this for many years with many topics. I'm still vividly remembering how we find pockets of or widespread presence of domestic violence, and we bring this up to the government, and the government says, well, why don't you set up some volunteer places where you can chat about it? It's just, I've never figured out how to solve that particular problem short of then organizing a community to really pressure. There are some good politicians who are ready for that opportunity.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Natalie Polver.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just wanted to go back to Lisa Burton's question and Raya's response. How can, I don't quite follow the relationship between local data, who is collecting the local data, and why it would be accepted by the state. Doesn't the state have to collect the data? I'm not quite clear on that.
All right. Lisa, would you like to, I know.
I can just weigh in. So in New Rochelle, we had the experience of when we wanted to stop a Starbucks from being built and the code being changed right next to our New Rochelle Municipal Housing and an emergency family shelter, that they took the air quality standard from the Bronx Botanical Garden as the nearest site
Yes.
for information, and that's how they said it was okay.
The state did that.
No, local law, local law
local
says that-
law.
it says that you have to get air quality, and they chose the federal EPA. So that's what I'm saying is if we change our local laws and demand that it be more hyper local, even if it means putting up sensors in the site that we're concerned about, because that data, that process is so much easier now than it was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I see.
If you know but the reliance and the performative, oh, we're going to go with the EPA site, and the nearest one is 30 miles away in the middle of a beautiful green spot,
Right.
not telling the story. It's
Uh,
not telling the story, and that's what we have all these performative pieces of legislature, and we could have kabuki theater. We don't need that. So that's what I'm saying. We need to look at on the local level where what's supposed to be protecting us is not.
Right, got it. Thank you. So the state was relying on federal data rather than on local data, but they could be looking at local data.
Someone has to decide what data is to be collected, and we need to insist that there be a change.
Got it. Thank you.
And for everybody's fun, the EPA actually has a site called Air Now, 6 letters, that maps out all of these things. One of the exciting maps shows all the sensors that have been closed down over the last 10 years, which is why they report our air numbers, our AQI, Air Quality Index. Not sure why they had to make it tough. From Botanical Gardens in the Bronx, which has one of the last old growth forests around, and quite a lot of miles. And so you're sitting in the middle of this old growth forest collecting the air samples, and that's what they're saying is going on in the South Bronx or in South Yonkers or in New Rochelle and so on. It's not really acceptable. This is not high-tech stuff for them.
Another thing, that could really be improved, I don't know about all of you, but our air quality warnings that we get from the state are, frankly, they appear useless to me. To the, the areas are, we get these emails for alerts. The areas are so wide. It'll literally say like not specified or vague, and like the actual information that they're giving in the email. And then they say, what do we do about this? Well, think about getting an energy efficiency upgrade. Like, it's just, I don't know if any of you are signed up for those alerts, but they could really use improving, in my opinion.
I think we also need to, so I just recently went to the National Association of County and City Health Associations in Detroit. And so small cities don't have a health department. Mount Vernon doesn't have their health department. All of Mount Vernon health data is housed and owned by the county. And every time we ask for a specific data point, it's almost every time they can't give it to us because it's mixed in with something else. So when we looked at the city charter, decades ago, Mount Vernon did have a health department. I mean, probably over 100 years ago, Mount Vernon had a health department. So I know it takes a lot of money, but I would suggest that people look at the charter and see if a health department or something regarding health existed prior. And I know it would take, like I said, a lot of funding to reactivate that. But even if you're a small village, somebody like Pelham, somebody like Mount Vernon, it's going to be our benefit to collect, house, and own our own data. I know that takes more hiring, it takes a new department, it takes additional people. It's going to be a marathon to do surveys, to get out in the community and put boots on the ground and really collect this data. But in the long run, it will be worth it. So I just encourage everybody to see if once upon a time, if they currently don't have a health department, see if once upon a time that it did exist, and see what the
Yeah,
policies and things was in place when it did exist.
Yeah, very interesting. That's right. I see Courtney Williams put in the chat, Yonkers and Peekskill have clusters of Title V polluters, meaning major polluters. They have pollutants that they must monitor, and we can ask DEC to make that data publicly available without a FOIA, right? Like they should be letting us know what's up with this without us having to like go through a legal process to get that information. Very good point, Courtney.
And I believe a lot of the things that these agencies don't want us to know, because if they let us know, that means they're on notice and that they have to do something. And if we don't know about it, then it's like, okay, it never happened.
And that's why I want, if everybody could please take a look at the story map. You know, at and again, there's a lot of different data, but this is what the state has put together. Take a look, find your community or find your house, find the places where you go to school, where you work. And again, these are disparities. These are not just it's bad. It's bad in Westchester. These are disparities. It's worse. And, you know, say in New Rochelle, and it's very hyper local. And we need you to tell us what we should be, us, the state, come on blast. Honestly, come on blast. Come with a list, be mad. Obviously, we're always constructive when we talk to our officials. And, but if you look at the New Rochelle map, right? The development is causing pollution. You know, it just is. You look at the map and you see those hotspots, it's causing problems. Those auto body places, they're causing problems. You know, and of course the highway. So, and we should be, you know, that's New Rochelle. Look at, you know, same things going on Mount Vernon, Yonkers. Look at where your school is, where your home is in proximity. And then come with this, not saying, come, happy warrior, because this is a time to work with them on solutions. Again, about the process. The state is mandated this year to come up with a plan for how they're going to think about pollution mitigation given the air monitoring they've done. So this is about actually putting plans in place. They're going to be working by statute with this climate justice working group and creating this list. And they are required to ask us what we think. So we need to show up and tell them what we think, what we need to have done. This is an economic development, a workforce development opportunity, pollution mitigation, but we have to also have solidarity with our peoples in our region, because they can throw money at it and nothing's going to happen.
Agreed. Well, I guess we'll have one last call for any questions from anyone in the audience.
I have a question, Paul. It's Eileen
Yes.
O'Connor. So this plan that the state is putting together, like using our example of Ludlow Park, Southwest Yonkers, and the sewage treatment plant and the air quality measures, is the county mandated to be involved in the planning process and not so much the planning process, but you know the plan that is drawn up? Are they then mandated to take responsibility? You know,
The CLCPA says that, you know, they need to come up with these plans, and yes, they should be working with state and local officials. And this is why it's our time. You know, it makes sense, right, for the state to be working with the county.
mhm.
And it makes sense for us to be pushing for accountability and also for the solutions and partnerships that make darn sense.
Right.
You know, and so part of that could be, you know, look, we know that we can't address the wastewater treatment plant with the type of controls that we know that we should be able to get unless you involve this actor as well. You need to be, you know, ... And the state is supposed, and the state has enforcement power. So, you know,
Okay. Right. Thank you.
And get your high school and college students involved. They're really excited about doing this. And give them the tools and let them loose.
I see.
that is so true. I'm so glad you said that. I'll throw out the Air of Truth. We're going to have our story booth. We're going to be at the New Rochelle Street Fair this Saturday. We're going to be taking stories from folks with air quality. We're going to have some of our students out there. Maybe you can get a t-shirt. We got some new t-shirts. Come by. Toss it back to Paul.
Great.
And I think we have Alex, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just one last, I don't know if that's a question, more of a statement. I know that we talk a lot about pollution as a result of processes. So, mobile sources, but the stationary sources are also really important. In particular, I was looking at the fact that New Rochelle is getting, well, it received $16 million in federal funds to support the Lincoln neighborhood. And the construction is going to cause air pollution. And essentially what I'm, I think a recurrent theme that I'm hearing throughout this conversation is that any kind of data that's collected needs to be hyper local, because otherwise you can't take data from Yonkers and say, well, this is what New Rochelle is experiencing when it's in Yonkers. It's very different in Ossining than it is in Peekskill, because Peekskill is right next to the incinerator. And Ossining, I don't know what the rate of asthma is here, but I can say that there probably might be, I would say probably is a disparity between Peekskill versus Ossining, and that hyper-local information is very important, or data is very important. But something that I wanted to ask as a follow-up to that is, are we kind of measuring or keeping track of, when these funds are coming in for construction or for processes that the DEC or the federal I would say rather the federal government has given for things like supporting the Lincoln neighborhood? And does the DEC come in and say, we're going to also measure air pollution in these areas, or water pollution as a result of the construction? I'm wondering if that's also a thing.
This is another thing that could be brought, right? Like, how are, you've got this data, but what happens when construction starts? What happens when you
Right.
have different overlapping projects? What are the local impacts as they're happening? I heard you saying,
Correct.
you have this data, what are you doing? I think that's a really important piece. Certainly with development in New Rochelle, if you look at the map, it says that there are some problems right where that is happening. And so I really encourage folks, again, it's not the be all end all. Lots of people are doing different stuff, but look at the story map, and because it's adding the school, the building, you can actually, the business, you can see where these things are coming from. And I really encourage folks to look at it. And, that's it. That's exactly right. Also, a bit of what you were saying, are we trying to track some of these funds? Absolutely, yes. The Environmental Bond Act, we should all be looking at like with a laser, because 40% of those funds are supposed to come to the disadvantaged communities, and there's a lot of additional money there. We need to be looking at that. There's still money, federal money. We need to be looking at that. And then, yes, we've got these pieces that have been coming, like little puzzle pieces that are both answers and causing problems. That's what I kind of heard from your thing, Alex, and that's fantastic. Paul,
Also,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, before we run out of time, also regarding those big developments, like you just mentioned, the Lincoln Avenue development, every development of that nature is mandated to do an environmental impact report regarding the development. Now, the question is that environmental impact report done by an independent company? Or
Yes, it's
does the
third party,
company
or
who's
is it
doing the
done by
development
Yeah,
choosing somebody to do the report in their favor?
right.
So that's something that needs to be, well, that's some clarity that's needed.
And
Yeah,
these-
Who
needs to
does
be
the
a
environmental
proposal.
impact
It can't be
reports?
done by
And
someone who has like a conflict. There can't be a conflict of interest. Like we saw, for instance, with, in my opinion, McKinsey doing the containerization study in the city. And they got $4 million when it could just have been someone or a group of people at the Department of Sanitation in New York. You need to know where's the money coming from and who's getting the money and who's running these studies, so on and so forth. It always should be a third
It's
party.
politics.
Yeah. And these are all the things I truly,
Shows up.
yes, Dr. Bob.
I say I wasn't sure if this showed up, but you too could
I
have
can see it.
your number on the map that you found and put on it. This is the purple air people
Oh,
set
see,
this up,
fantastic.
and you can generate some background information cheaply that you can then bring to those who have fancier machines and so on, and say, "This is what we're seeing. What are you seeing?"
And we can share, we will follow this up with some links, some resources, the flyer for what's happening in Mount Vernon. Look, folks, I'm all, I'm really pitching this engagement thing that we should show up, nothing for us without us. If we show up and tell them what's what, they're going to take notice. And if we don't, they won't. And I know it's what is it, a Wednesday night, and it's during climate week, for Frankie's sake, and all that, but we can also send in comments, physical paper. They're going to have their surveys. So we're going to try and do what we can to give folks the tools to comment whether or not you can come or not. But I'll hand it back to Paul.
One last thing. The federal government rarely gives the public an opportunity to speak directly to them. Rarely. So please take advantage of this opportunity, like Raya said, and show up, have no filter, but be respectful. Speak how you feel, but be respectful, and take advantage of this opportunity. We often voice our opinions on social media, and it goes nowhere. So this is the time to be in front of the New York State DEC, but they also report to the federal DEC, and voice your opinion. Show up. You have to show up to be involved. This is only the start of this movement. This pre-meeting or this introduction to what's going to happen on September 25th. Please show up, bring your friends, bring your neighbors, bring everybody.
Thank you so much. We will be hawking all these processes when the Climate Justice Working Group meets. We will be hawking all of these things to make sure that our voice is heard. I promise you, they will know our region shows out. They'll know they can't overlook us.
Thank you. Whoops.
Oh, Paul, you're on mute, sir.
Wow, sorry about that. So I do want to thank all of you for tuning in for this program. Thank you, Raya, as well, for providing a forum for us to have this introductory conversation on the community air quality monitoring so that we could be better prepared to be able to best represent our neighborhoods on the 25th at the Doles Center. Thank you, Sustainability Director Brooks, for joining us as well and providing your perspective as a Chief Sustainability Officer for one of the city level government in one of the cities that was being monitored. And also thank you, Dr. Morrow, for providing your expertise from the medical perspective and really hammering home the impacts, as well as sharing your initiatives you've already been taking, being able to do air quality monitoring and having the mobile interfacing that you showed us, that it's publicly accessible mapping that I could look and see what's being done in Yonkers. All of you, this is the beginning of a really dynamic conversation that we need to have and continue to have in order to make sure that we're doing the best to our abilities of being able to preserve our natural resource of clean access to air. Also, I do want to make sure I mention to everyone that 2025, next year, is a big year through the electoral lens. Our elections do have consequences, and it's really important that the people that we are looking to be our county leaders have a forward-thinking strategy about our air quality, about our natural resource preservation, and also being able to know that they have to make sure that they're addressing some of our big carbon emitters and making sure that they are scheduled to be decarbonized in alignment with our Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. 2025 is going to be 5 years away from our 2030 goal for our CLCPA, where our grid has to be at 70% renewable. And by 2040, we have an ambitious goal to have our grid at 100% carbon-free emissions for our entire state grid. So it's important that the people that we're placing in leadership really are being advised in the appropriate way in environmental energy related sciences, and they're really being entrusted with the confidence and leadership of all of you who I recognize as leaders all throughout our county to make sure that they're doing the right decisions. But it starts with us having these conversations and really making sure that we as a community are holding our state and our county accountable. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to kick the can down the road. So thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you, Raya. I do want to encourage all of you to join the Energy Justice Alliance as well. We put the link in the chat. Please join an individual and organizational membership because we'll like to continue to have these events, different programs, and maybe you have an idea that we could highlight for a program in a different area of Westchester County. But thank you all for joining us today.
Paul, I just want, I'm sorry to interrupt at the very last second because Charlotte Vinson asked a question that
Yes.
I would ask. She asked, will a one-pager be created to highlight the issues that should be addressed at the September 25th meeting? Are you planning to send out something along those lines?
I have put in the chat, and this is, I put some draft.
Okay, the sample testimonies.
And this,
Oh.
again, though, this is not, this is not all verified. Like, take a look. If something doesn't look right, let us know. Comment, feel free to comment on it, and then look at the story map and take a look at that because
Great.
what I tried to do was characterize some of these things, but I might miss it. I shared this with Dr. Bob. He said, what about the sugar trucking? I said, oops. So, we need people to
That's
take
good.
a look.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care,
Good
everyone.
night.
Mhm.